Welcome to the Ordinary Discipleship Podcast. I'm Jessie Cruickshank, and we love to talk about how people are responding to the call of God on their life. If you are unsure if God is asking you to do something, then this is the episode for you. So I have Jacqueline and Obe Arellano, and we are going to talk today about their life as ministers in Mexico and just the things that God is doing in Mexico and in the ministry that they're working with. So they have experience all over the world. They're going to share a little bit about that as well. Jacqueline, Obe, so happy to have you on today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you so much for having us. Well, ladies first.
Always.
My name is Jacqueline Arellano, and I serve with Exponential Español. We have been serving with Exponential USA since about 2010-ish, 11. And so we now have founded, OB has founded Exponential Español in 2020.
Yeah, it's a great year to found
Yep,
something, isn't it? Let me start a new ministry. It's
it
Yes,
2020.
is.
it was.
It was a great year. It was actually because things were just slow. It was just a good year to focus on getting it off the ground. Yeah, Obi, leading Exponential Español, we together lead Exponential Español, and it's been great. The last 5 years being on this adventure, helping churches, helping Hispanic or Spanish-speaking churches be able to go beyond addition into reproduction and multiplication of churches. So that's the area of ministry that we're in.
Yeah, so for those of the audience that don't know what exponential is, just say a little bit more about the Becoming Five and just give them a little idea of
Yeah.
what the church planting or the church multiplication paradigm is. So,
Yeah. So the Exponential's mission is to see that multiplication of churches becomes like the measure of success, so that more churches can become church planting churches. And be able to reach more people. There's 5 levels. Exponential has done research, and we've discovered that there's 5 levels of churches. And I'll briefly go through them. Level one are level churches that are in decline, churches that are subtracting. So I mean, just like the level shows that churches that are declining in attendance, in membership, in impact in their neighborhood or community or city. Level two is a church that is plateaued. Pretty much it's stuck. It's not growing. It's not in decline either. Level three are the church of addition. Those are churches that are growing in numbers and impact. Level four is a church that is reproducing, churches that are starting to reproduce who they are, what they do, reproducing churches in other parts of their city or state or country, wherever, whatever vision they have. And then level five churches are the church of multiplication, churches that are multiplying. Level five churches are churches that are reproducing, so level four, but are reproducing to the fourth generation of church plants and beyond. That's what makes them a multiplying church that are leaving a legacy of multiplication. There's a percentage, so 80% of the churches are level one or level two, so in decline or plateaued. 13% are adding or growing. 7% are reproducing and multiplying, so level four, level five. So our mission is to see that 16% of churches become level four, level five, reproducing or multiplying churches. So what we do is we offer resources through books, through gathering experiences, spaces where leaders can be poured into, sharing resources to help them, leaders, become multiplying leaders that help their churches become multiplying churches.
I love it. And so you guys are doing that work now in Mexico, right? So,
Yes. Yes, ish.
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 tell us about that.
Because
Tell us
yeah,
about
That's
how
the
and
journey
where.
yeah,
we're
that's
on,
the journey
actually.
we're on. Yes.
So we have been serving the Spanish-speaking church for the past 4 years. That's fully been our concentration
Yeah.
is the Spanish-speaking
5 years
church
now.
in the United
Yeah.
States. And so in the end of last year, we made the move to Mexico City so we can strategically be positioned in Latin America to expand now to Latin America. So everything that we have learned through Exponential USA and then also through the work that we've been doing through Exponential Español, now we're trying to see how we expand into Latin America. And so that's where we're at right now. We are starting off the year trying to meet and be in spaces where we get to meet more Latin American leaders that are passionate about multiplication as well. So that way we can continue growing and bringing the resources that we have accumulated for the past few years to Latin America.
Yeah.
So here we are in Mexico City.
In Mexico City, like you mentioned, strategic because it is a hub that is connected to every country in Central and South America, including Mexico, that's in North America. But we can go to any major city of any country in Latin America, and also we can, because we're still serving in the U.S. Exponential Español is still doing work in the U.S. for the Hispanic churches in the U.S.
Great.
So
I'm glad you didn't abandon us.
not at all, not
You
not at
just
all.
expanded. You expanded your tent.
That's all we're
Yes, we
doing.
expanded our tent.
Yeah, we're expanding. We're still committed to the Hispanic church in the U.S. That's not changing. So from Mexico City, strategically, we can go to anywhere in Latin America, in South America, and Central America. But also, we can go to any major city, and we're as
In the US.
connected. Sorry, in the
Mm.
U.S., we're as connected as if we were living in the U.S. still. So
Mm.
so it's strategic. Why also Mexico City?
No, that totally makes sense. So my question that like the first one that comes up is, what do you find that's translating well? Because it feels like, wow, that is a universal struggle or paradigm or learning, regardless of what country you're in or what people group you're working with. And then what are you finding that seems a bit more contextualized? You're like, wow, okay, that's a thing that they're dealing with, the Hispanic churches or Spanish speaking churches are dealing with in the United States, but it doesn't really transfer that well to some of the more rural parts of Central and South America? Or is it the cities that are the same? Is it the culture that's the same? Like how are you discerning what translates and what needs contextualization and maybe even additional resources or specialized resources?
It's such a complex question. We can go different directions. So culturally, it is very different than the Hispanic culture in the U.S. Even you were saying earlier today that what's the percentage of Latinos in the U.S. that are immigrants from Latin America? Did you say what was that?
So, out of the Hispanics or Latin Americans that are in the United States, only 33% are non-U.S. citizens.
No.
So
From the 65
million
million
people.
Latinos that are in the U.S., 30% of that are non-U.S. citizens that are essentially immigrants from a Latin American country.
So 70%
So
are U.S. citizens.
Yes, U.S. Citizen or resident. They are
Yeah.
with legal documentation in the United States, and they can be already third, fourth generation as
Yeah.
well. So we've been in the United States for a few years.
for a few years.
I mean, I live in the West, right? I mean, I know that the border of Mexico came up to Pueblo, Colorado, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
It's all
aware
the
of
way
our
up there.
geographic history.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
it
right.
kind of crossed us a little. So,
Yeah.
and the context for those third, fourth, and generations in the immigrant, even in the United States, is very different from immigrant people that are coming to the United
Yeah.
States to the people that have been born there through
Yeah.
generations or were there before even the border crossed us.
Yeah.
It's very different to what it is in Mexico and
Yeah.
the rest of Latin America.
And that's why I mentioned understanding a little bit of the Latino context and the subcultures that are in the Hispanic context in the U.S. Is necessary to understand, or even for me to say, well, let me compare the culture of Mexico, where we're in right now, or cities in Latin America to the U.S. because you can't compare it.
Mhm.
There's so many subcultures. There's so many generations of Latinos, and only 30% are immigrants. So comparing it like side by side, it's very difficult, right? Because also within that 30%, or even the 70%, the 65 million Hispanic Latinos that are in the US, there's every country in Latin America represented, right? So the majority, yes, is Mexico, and then there's a few others that have high percentages. But even that, it's difficult to compare side by side.
Mhm.
But as far as like church culture goes, which is the area that we're serving in, it's also very different. There's this weird dynamic that I think I came to discover that I don't know if it's that it's been proved, but at least I can observe this, and it boggles my mind. And this will help understand the culture context difference of churches in Latin America and in the U.S. So, for instance, the Hispanic church in the U.S., the majority of Hispanic Spanish speaking churches, they actually look up to their churches in Latin America, their churches where they came from, whether it's their sending church or the church where they became Christians or an influential church in Latin America, because they understand the language, the context, all that stuff, right?
The culture.
But they look up to them. And then what's happening, the dynamic is that the churches that they're looking up to in Latin America, they are actually looking up at the church in the US to be influenced by them. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally,
So then
totally. It's like,
they're
who's
like
your
looking
spiritual
down, but then
hero?
these ones are being influenced by that. So in essence, they could be looking directly to their neighbors and learn from them, but many are not doing that. The majority are not doing that. So that creates a huge gap between the Hispanic church in the US. Maybe you've heard this before. The Hispanic church in the US and even a lot of culture is about 20 years behind the predominant culture in the US, right? And that's because they're looking down, so there's a delay. And then the church in Latin America, it's about 10 years behind from the church in the US, so then that creates a bigger gap. So that just, I mean, I don't know if I'm confusing and I'm just going long on that, but that just a weird dynamic that we're seeing within the people that we're interacting with here, but also that we've been interacting with in the US for years, for many years now.
So then what are you finding transfers? Where do you find the growth edge is? And what are you seeing what are you seeing that God is doing?
So in what transfers, I'll let you share on what we're
Go,
seeing
Kristen.
God do. But in the things that transfers well and easy are principle based practices or teachings, right? Things that are it's more a principle rather than, oh, let me do it because this is my model of how we're doing it in the US. So exponential, we have simplified the areas where we think every church needs to focus on and multiplying those areas so that they can experience multiplication in their churches. So we try to simplify it by creating principle, based resources. So for instance, multiplying discipleship. Discipleship, it's a huge area of multiplication that we need to address. And so that's like making disciples that make disciples, creating a disciple making culture, not just a discipleship. I feel like discipleship, it entails more of a classes and that type of setting.
Yeah, spiritual
But disciple make
disciplines and learning and stuff
right,
like that. Yeah,
right. Disciple making culture, it's life, doing life,
exactly.
inviting others into a journey. So we want to share that level of principle of disciple making. So when we talk about disciple making, it's so simple in its essence that it can be applied in whatever context the church is working that area in. So then when we bring those teachings and learnings to Mexico or Latin America, it's so easy to be applied in its context because we're just removing all of the models and this church is doing that, the church is doing that, but it's like it's a foundational aspect of that makes it easy to be contextualized, right? So I think as we simplify those principles of multiplication, at least in our context, multiplying disciples, multiplying leaders, mobilizing the church for mission, and then simplifying that, those are principle based teachings that we share, that it makes it easy to be received by any church in any context in Latin America, rather than like, well, let me teach you how our church in the US was doing it so you can do it, even though it's disciple making, but we want to teach a model that's what is not necessarily transferable or contextualized.
So we have two spaces, right? The Spanish speaking church in the USA, and then of course the Latin American church. And what I see in both spaces happening, of course, the United States being the second largest country of Spanish speakers in the world, what we see is what we have been observing and studying in the past few years is how God is raising up the Hispanic church in the United States. How is He doing that? I think we're seeing a lot of decline in the church in the United States. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't want to grasp that or accept that because of how we were founded in the United States as how we were taught. We were founded as a church looking for the freedom to worship, right? And so, like a Christian church. And so, but what we saw in the last few years is that the Hispanic church, the Spanish speaking church, is a church that is continues to grow. We continue to grow as believers in Christ, and so we are the church. It sounds so we're amazing, but we are the church that's kind of raising the bar in Christianity for United States, and so we are observing that, and we celebrate that because we know that God is doing great things through the Hispanic church. And of course, the enemy will rise up against the Hispanics of our country because we are the church that is rising up to be able to do the works that we're doing as Christians. We hear so many times when we went to Spain a few years ago, and we heard that so many missionaries were coming from the Hispanic church to Spain to evangelize Spain now and help that church be established. That was a confirmation that the Hispanic church is the church that's rising up to spread the gospel in the United States and to other places. And so that's one of the things that we observed as Spanish speaking church. Now, in the past few months, we're also seeing some changes in how the Hispanic church should prepare in our countries. Like the Spanish speaking church in Latin America is going to need to prepare for some of the changes that are happening in the United States to receive all of the people that are coming. And so that's a huge opportunity for us in Mexico and beyond to prepare our churches to receive all the maybe undocumented and even documented people that decide or are deported to their countries of origin. It's a great opportunity for the church. And I think we need to be paying attention to what's going on in the United States because it will affect us in the future as the church needs to prepare for all of the people that will be coming home to their native countries. And how can we prepare for that? I think there's opportunities for evangelism because there's going to be some that will be deported because of their records or whatever has happened in their past. But there's also opportunities for many people that are willing to make a change in their address to come and be maybe the people that we use for opportunities for job employment and help people that are already here rise and be better equipped for the future.
Yeah, I mean, the last 5 years, right, post-COVID, the most of the growth in Christianity in North America was churches planted by the Hispanic church and the immigrant church, right? It was the most
Hmm.
vibrant part of the body of Christ
Yes.
in North America. And then
Yes.
in, 2025, we're seeing those churches not feeling safe enough to gather, right? Our friends at World Relief just sharing that of people getting deported, 80% are Christian. You spoke so delicately, Jack. I'm gonna let your words stand because I would talk about it a slightly different way, maybe with a little more angst and fire. Um,
Well, some people will accept the non-delicate version from you more than from me. So we've learned our lesson through the years that the way I look sometimes portrays things very differently than what we're all trying to say, but I have to speak delicately.
well, I just want to acknowledge that, and I don't, I want to thank you for that. Whenever somebody else carries water again for
Uh-huh.
problems, for pain, I just always want to acknowledge that. It sounds like you're preparing churches across Latin America to accept refugees from the
Hmm.
United States.
Yes.
People that they have never, countries that they've never been in, countries that they haven't been
Mhm.
raised in, even if that's what other, at some point documentation, demonstrates as a country of origin. It sounds like you are seeing that as an opportunity for people with no culture and no home to create home, to create. I mean, if anything, it just teaches us what potentially kingdom looks like apart from what a social, national culture could look like. That's like a huge thing. You guys, I mean,
It's
in fact, the
huge.
only thing that you guys have is a single language, right? It sounds like so many different cultures, so many different things.
Yes.
It's, the unifying factor is Spanish, and even then,
Mhm.
I've been in most of South America and some of the Caribbean, and, like, Spanish is not the same.
No,
Mm.
it is not.
Mhm.
I can
Mhm.
understand
It's very
in some
different.
nations, and in some nations I can't. How are you processing that assignment? How are you processing that? Are you building a team right now? How can they pray for you?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'll add something. That's a great question, and I think we're in the process of listening to God and how better prepare for that, because we're in the
Yeah,
beginning phase of all the
all of
things
this.
that's happening. It's happened before. We're not saying it's new, but the way it's happening right now, it's aggressive, and we're listening, we're praying, and yes, we want to build a team. We want to have support, not just through prayer, for us to be able to help. And we two people in Mexico City, will not be able to do that, but the position that we have leading Exponential Español, being able to equip churches
Mhm.
to know how to receive people that maybe don't even know the language in Spanish, right? They only
Yeah.
know English. How to best equip churches here to welcome people that are going to be not even coming back. Some, yes, the majority, but others coming to a country they've never been in, which is, it boggles my mind that that's happening right now.
Mhm.
So, if I can say prayer for that type of support to help us equip churches better to receive people and create safe spaces where they can journey and disciple them if they're in that journey. Support for prayer, for support, financial support for us to continue doing the trainings and gathering pastors and leaders to be able to equip them, not just for this, but the other work that we're doing. Those are two ways that people can be praying for us. But if I can add, it's really important to understand the level of spiritual warfare that is happening with all of this.
Mhm.
Because going back to what Jack says, we're not only the second largest, if we were to count only the Spanish speakers or the Latinos in the US, we would be the second largest country, right? There's a whole other factors that we can say that if we can count only the Hispanic financials or economy,
Imagine.
we would be the fifth largest country,
Yes.
the fifth largest economy in the world. There's already some research that it's telling us that in 25 years, in 30 years, the Latinos are going to be the largest minority, sorry, the largest geographic, the group of people in the US. I mean, if you think about that, the Latinos will be the largest group of people
People.
Yeah,
in
it'll
the
be the
US.
majority.
It will
Yeah.
be the majority. And obviously, one, there are some people that don't like that and they want to stop that from happening. Hence, what is going on right now. Also, you mentioned that Christianity in the US has been in decline for the last, 25 years. A huge factor that is starting to turn that the state of Christianity in the U.S. is the Latino church, is the Latino people. You mentioned over the last 5 years, Latinos are the ones who have been planting more vibrant churches, right?
Mhm.
So the enemy, our enemy, our spiritual enemy, does not like that.
Yeah.
It
Well.
wants to see a country in decline in Christianity. So there's going to be plans that we want to halt that as as early as possible to not see that happening. So that level of what's going on behind just what we see, it's good for us to be aware of, knowing that there's a greater fight that we're in the midst of, beyond just the things that we're seeing.
Just the political things. We have been talking about this for a while. I think the Hispanic Church has been trying to bring this to the attention of our English speaking only Americans that, hey, you guys need to be starting something in Spanish. Why isn't this in Spanish? Why aren't we doing church in Spanish? Why does this resource not exist in Spanish? And so I think this is what God has been trying to tell the church all these years. It's happening. It's happening, that what he was warning us is that they are going to try to shut that voice down. They are going to try to shut that people group down. And so I think it's an important time in our as Christians to pay attention to what is happening in our country, the United States, to help them understand that they need to rise up to this occasion. That they need to fight back for this, that they need to not shut that voice down. Because what if you shut the Spanish speaking church down, the voice, it's the Lord's work that is getting shut down. It's not our work. It's not our economy or our goodness or whatever you wanted to say. It's literally the church being shut down. Two, I think the way that we're trying to prepare churches here is just, I really believe it was crazy when 2024 ended and 2025 starts and we see the shift happening, and we are actually in Mexico City at such a time as this, right? That we are a couple of Mexican or Latin American kids from the U.S. that know both languages, that both cultures are within us. We are just as Chicagoan just as we are, Mexican or Guatemalan in my case. For God to bring people, and we keep seeing more people like us that were raised in the United States with our Hispanic roots and language never lost, that are in the city. And so we keep meeting different people from different places of the United States that have migrated here for whatever their reason is, whether it's for business, whether it's political, whether it's for our work as ministers. But I think God has strategically placed people like us here to help us receive those people that will be brought to the to Latin America from the United States. And so I think that was a great eye opener for us when we start seeing how things are changing and happening back home, and how we're here for this season. And every pastor that I talk to is, hey, you need to prepare. There's going to be people from the United States coming that are going to need a church as well. And some of these people don't know Spanish. So how do we prepare for that?
It sounds like the kindness of God in the midst of the craziness of humanity. What is keeping your faith up? What is keeping your, I don't know, joy, maybe, even if you get to experience some of that, but like, what is encouraging you, and what is keeping your head lifted? Because whenever we experience injustice, whenever a whole people group is dehumanized, like, we all feel that, right? There's a secondary trauma to that. And I just worry about, yeah, it may not be happening to you, but it's happening in your community in Chicago, or when a people group is vilified or dehumanized, that affects everybody. So how are you maintaining encouragement and in the Lord, or even not in the Lord? Maybe it's just you go on a walk and, like, nature is beautiful or something like that. It doesn't have to be doesn't have to be hyper spiritual, but I think as in the United States, the pain that some communities are feeling is extremely profound, and in some communities it hasn't reached it there yet, right? So it's not everyone in the United States right now is experiencing the moment the same, but it will eventually get everywhere. And so maybe it's a prophetic word that you have today, that whenever somebody listens to this, they're like, oh, that's the thing I needed to hear, because I didn't feel the pain in April when we're recording this, but
Uh-huh.
when I'm listening to it now, that wave has finally reached my house. How do you guys stay out of discouragement or
It,
remind yourselves of the Lord in all of this?
yeah, it is very personal. It does affect our families. It is something that we do fear for some family members, and we do get afraid for them. We know that there's life beyond the United States. And so we try to encourage some of our family that Jesus is still king. And no matter where we're at, and no matter who's on platform or on offices, Jesus is still king. We are still his, and so he will still provide for us. And there is a world outside of the United States, and it is just as beautiful and just as amazing and just as plentiful in different areas. And so I have a few very, very close family members that I have to remind, hey, everything that we learned in the United States, we could take it to everywhere else. And these are resources that we were given for maybe a time like this. And so it's okay if there's fear and uncertainty, but there is a Lord that still prepares us and still takes care of us. And I think for me to stay okay, I have to avoid many many outlets that just make me feel unloved and uncared and unwanted and visible and vilified, you know? And so the most important outlet that I need to be plugging into is my word and my prayer life to remind me who God says I am. And I am not second class citizen or a minority, anything. There's nothing minor about me. Everything's pretty major in me. So I have to always kind of remind me and others what the Lord says, who he says we are. And no matter who can say all the things that they say, it doesn't affect me because I know who I am in Christ. And so that's probably the message that I would want to let others know is, hey, remember who he says you are. And he is eternal. He's not just for a term. He has no terms and he has no time limits. He is eternal and he says, I am this. And so that's a great reminder for me. So I do need this reminder as well, but it's a reminder that I also share with others.
So good.
I think also, like for me, remembering that God uses every season and He brings out specific purpose and plans that need to come to pass, and it requires having seasons that are challenging or difficult for some. Understanding that there's always purpose in the midst of it, and remembering that God continues to be in control, even though it doesn't seem like things are in control by God. He always is in control.
Yeah.
And asking the right questions as far as like, how can I be a part of that? How can I do my part? What is God wanting for me right now in this season for my church, to serve my church, to lead my church, to, or just be part of a church or anything, or part of my community, part of my family. That's a good reminder that for me, it drives me to push through the difficult circumstances that we may be in. And there's going to come a time where we'll look back and we'll realize, oh wow, we've done all this, or this much has been accomplished, even though we didn't feel like it in the midst of it. There will come a time where we kind of look back and be like, yes, we endured, where we remain faithful, and we continued on whatever specific responsibility, role, journey, assignment that God had for us in seasons.
Whether it's us that listen to this later or anyone else, like in the moment, I really
Oh,
believe it's going to be a word to somebody of encouragement. So thank
Yeah.
you.
We hope so.
To bring it back, one last question. As we've kind of set the landscape of what your missional work is, the equipping work that you do, the broadness of it, and then the cultural moment that it finds itself in. How do you see God using both of those things to help the Hispanic church multiply? Because with the Spanish speaking churches that I've worked with, usually you have to be 60 before you finally get to be in the leadership role, right? Like it's
mhm.
the only way that it multiplies through, having kids and beautiful family, dynamics, but there's not really like leadership gaps. It
Mhm.
values the wisdom of age. So bringing these things together, how do you see how the Lord is gonna multiply the Hispanic church in the United States and across the rest of Americas?
Yeah, I mean, the Hispanics just multiply more than in general.
And
So
quickly.
biologically, we multiply more. So even if we look at statistics and geographic ground right now, I think 3 out of 4 people under 20 or under 18, 3 out of 4 are Latinos. Can you think about that for a moment? 75% of
We
people
reproduce.
under 18. So I think in just physically or biologically, that's going to happen. Um, but I think just the drive that the Latino church brings, and in Latin America, multiplication has happened more.
Mhm.
And even if the story is not told in the U.S. just because the U.S., the church, they
They
have
focus on the
been they
U.S.
focus on
church.
the U.S., right? So I truly believe that as the Latino demographic continues to grow, because it will, there will be, and there are right now some bumps along the road, but I think we're gonna see more and more younger leaders. You're saying, yeah, the reality is still older majority. 80% of the churches are probably leaders under over 60. But this new generation, younger millennials, Gen Z or older Gen Zers that are starting to plant churches, they're planting and reproducing at higher rates than the previous generation. So, for instance, we literally just had a coffee meeting with a couple young church planters. Couple, they're in their early 30s.
Mhm.
They planted in pandemic, and they've already planted a couple churches.
Yeah.
And there's actually some research that shows that younger leaders or leaders under 40, pastors under 40, I think there's 85% of pastors under 40 say that part of their goals as a pastor in church is to be a reproducing church.
Mhm.
So as more younger leaders become the majority, it'll take time, right? But I think we're gonna see a shift in the health of the church where we're actually multiplying more, and then we're starting to see a younger set of overall leadership that will eventually kind of be the majority of leadership. And it's a shift that we really need, to be honest,
I think
because
it's a shift we're seeing already. I think
we're moving in that direction.
yeah, I think we're seeing already, at least in our circles, a lot of the people that we've been speaking with and learning from Mexico context, they're all in their 40s or younger. It's been rare in Mexico. In the United States, a different story. In Mexico, because they are a little more ahead than the Spanish speaking church in the U.S., we do see a lot more younger leaders, and it's very rare for me to sit with a 60-year-old or a 50-year-old even
Mm-hmm.
here in Mexico. In the United States, a very different story.
Yeah.
In Mexico and in Latin America, we've seen more younger leaders than older leaders, more seasoned leaders.
Right. It's just as a
Because
value.
I'm approaching that season.
Yeah, seasoned. Oh, and are they doing it with the blessing of the older generation? Are they not? Is it not creating a generational gap?
It's getting there. I don't think we're fully there yet. I think less than 50% of those younger leaders that are planting are with the blessing of their previous generation. And part of it is just that generational gap, that traditional mindset of how to start a church. You have to wait. You're saying you're right on. They have to wait until they've paid their dues in leadership, and then once the current pastor is ready to go to God's glory in heaven for eternity,
Right, not retire.
then
That's
they'll
not a
consider.
thing. That's not a thing.
Right.
It's not a
No, that's not a
retire
thing.
thing.
That's not a thing. Yeah.
We
So
don't know how to retire.
yeah. So I think slowly we'll start getting there, but we're not there yet.
No, but there is a passion in this generation, I think, because what we do see a lot is we're tired of that.
Mm,
And people are losing their salvation. We're not reaching these people. We're not going to these people. We're not accepting or inviting the people that need to be looking, we need to be serving and looking for, and we need to be aggressive in our way of finding lost people that need the Lord. And this is why we have this generation, I think, of just a passionate younger leaders that are not going to wait till they paid their dues. They have work to do, and they feel this need to do this work. And so
yeah.
that's inspiring, and it completely like makes me, okay, we have work to do. We cannot wait until we get the blessing. That's how I feel. Like they're like, we need to do this now, with or without the blessing,
Oh.
which is sad for the older generation and the younger generation. And so that opens up a space for, there's a need for mentorship, there's a need for pastors, there's a need for these spiritual parents. And so these older generation that do believe in this younger generation, we need to open up ourselves also to help these younger generation do the work that the Lord has put upon their heart.
Yeah. That's so good. And a bit more focused and intentional development rather than just, watch me and come alongside me for a long time. We're
Mm-hmm.
gonna
Mhm.
do a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
an acceleration. Well, you guys, it's such a beautiful work that you do, and I'm a huge fan. I mean, stalked you across, Brazil. I have a huge passion for justice, and the United States being the second largest Spanish-speaking nation in the
Mm-hmm.
world, and I speak Spanish super poorly, but I've been just across South America so much, and man, I mean, you just fall in love with a people group, and so for me, that's yeah, that's kind of why I come at this
Yeah.
with a bit of passion.
Yeah.
So
Well, we thank you also. I think this is a huge step for you and for us to be able to talk about these things and for you to open up spaces for the Spanish speaking church, for Exponential Español, for what are some of the things, how are we multiplying our churches, but also how are we coming alongside those people that are vulnerable in in this season. And these conversations need to happen. And we thank you also for opening up the space to talk about the Spanish church, speaking church. And we're, of course, a big fan of yours too.
Yeah.
It's a mutual
well, at least, yay,
fandom.
we can love each other back. I feel like my Gen Z assistant, said she was in her first conversation where someone was like, "Hey, I like you as a friend. Do you like me as a friend back?" And it was her first one of those as an adult, and I'm like, "Oh, honey, we just keep having those."
Oh yeah.
We need that.
Well,
We need to cheer each other on.
exactly.
It's different spaces and different angles to the church. But we need to have these spaces to talk about them, and there's other things going on in the world as well that we need to be learning about. And so,
Yeah.
thank you for this time. I appreciate it so much.
Well, you guys are beautiful, and thanks for coming on and sharing your heart and being a little candid, a
He's
little
beautiful.
vulnerable,
Did you see that?
huh?
He's beautiful.
That's
You
because he
too.
grows the
Tú
beard.
también. Yeah. Yeah, it's the beard. Gives me a little bit of character.
My husband has a beard, but he's Scottish, so it's all like scraggly. There's
Yeah.
nothing elegant about it. It's
Oh, there's way to fix that.
you can't. Oh
A
my
little bit
gosh.
of grooming it.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I super appreciate
Yes.
who you are and what you do, and you are in my prayers. And if you're listening to this,
Thank
will you
you.
please pray for the Spanish speaking church across the
Yes.
Americas, north, south, and central, because they
Yes.
need your prayers right now. So
Thank you
Yes.
very
Thank you.
much. Also for our Spanish church in Spain. They
mhm.
are going through a beautiful, I think the Lord is just like, nope, I'm not losing them too. So he's sending so many missionaries from Latin America to Spain,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful picture that the Lord is giving us, that no one's left
Mm,
behind. So,
Yeah.
so thankful for
mm.
that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jesse, for having
Thank you,
us.
Jesse.
We've enjoyed this time, and yeah, thank you. Hopefully, this conversation is helpful to anyone who's listening right
Yeah.
now.
Well, you have been listening to the Ordinary Discipleship Podcast. Remember, you can always learn more at whoology.co. That's WHOOLOGY.co.